It began as an ordinary afternoon in Montecito, quiet and golden under the California sun. Marina Halsten had returned early from a product strategy meeting, hoping for a rare moment of stillness in her week. The house was silent, except for the gentle rustling of eucalyptus trees outside her glass doors. She moved into her personal wellness studio, a minimalist space filled with soft rugs, plants, and framed photos of her children. She wasn't planning to do anything remarkable, just a bit of stretching, some movement to ease the tension in her shoulders. Then, almost impulsively, she began to dance. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't planned. It was the kind of dance that came from inside, loose and slow, hips swaying gently to a beat only she could hear. She twirled barefoot across the polished floor, her long kaftan catching the light in waves. Her movements were soft, playful, even maternal. At one point, she placed a hand lightly on her belly as she spun. From the hallway, Kayla, her assistant and longtime friend, stood silently, watching through the partially open door. Kayla lifted her phone and instinctively recorded a few seconds of the moment. She wasn't thinking about virality or headlines. She thought it was beautiful, human, real. Kayla later uploaded the clip to a private story on her social media, meant for just a close circle of friends. But someone in that circle took a screen recording. Within hours, it was in the hands of fan pages. And then, the internet did what it always does. The video landed online with the caption, "Marina's baby mama dance?" It exploded. In less than 2 hours, hashtag baby mama dance and hashtag baby no3 were trending. News outlets reposted it. Influencers stitched it. TikTok was flooded with reaction videos. Speculation surged. Was this a soft pregnancy reveal? A symbolic message? Fans zoomed into her stomach, analyzed the folds in her dress, even slowed down the video frame by frame to confirm what they desperately hoped was a bump. Marina was unaware at first. She had left her phone on silent in another room and taken a long bath afterward. By the time she wrapped herself in a robe and stepped out, her inbox was flooding. Kayla stood at the kitchen island looking pale. Marina asked what had happened. Kayla hesitated, then handed her the phone. Marina watched the clip, watched herself dancing, watched the flood of comments rolling in underneath. Then she placed the phone down without reacting. Her face remained unreadable. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the hills, Marina sat in the garden with a warm mug of tea and tried to slow her thoughts. She knew how the game worked. Once something caught on, it was nearly impossible to put out the flames. She thought about her previous pregnancies. Both times she had gone to great lengths to control the narrative, to protect her peace, her timing. She hadn't even told her parents until she was almost 5 months in with her second child. Now, because of 10 seconds of dancing, she had lost control. Across the country, in New York, Julian Maddox was wrapping up a late dinner when his phone buzzed. He was Marina's former press aide, a sharp-eyed strategist who had managed her public image during some of her most turbulent years. He glanced at the message from a gossip blog alert and clicked the link. He watched the clip in silence, then closed his laptop and sat back in his chair. He remembered that exact sway of her hips. It was something she did when she was happy, but it was also something she did when she needed to be left alone. He typed out a message but didn't send it right away. Instead, he called another contact, someone still working with Marina, and asked if she had made any sort of official announcement. They told him no. There was no press release, no campaign, no baby news. Just a video. Just chaos. By morning, the theories had gone international. Some believed it was a subtle PR stunt. Others insisted she was already 3 months along. Conspiracy accounts compared the video to previous footage, citing differences in her walk and posture. Marina read through some of the posts with an eerie calm. She didn't deny anything, but she also didn't confirm. Then she powered off her phone, stood in front of the mirror, and asked herself the question that everyone else already had. Was she pregnant? She didn't answer out loud. She just stared, one hand resting over her stomach, the other slowly curling into a fist dot by the time Marina opened her phone the next morning. The frenzy had evolved into a full-blown media cycle. News anchors debated the meaning of the video. On morning talk shows, celebrity blogs ran split-screen comparisons of her previous pregnancies. Even fashion commentators weighed in, analyzing the cut of her caftan for clues. She sipped her ginger tea slowly, watching the headline scroll across the screen like a surreal dream. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, in Accra, Ghana, Devon Halsten was jolted awake by a barrage of notifications. His team had tried to hold the information until a decent hour, but someone from the foundation had casually mentioned Marina's name trending on Twitter. Devon rubbed his eyes and reached for his phone, confused by the volume of unread messages. He saw it, the clip. 10 seconds. A small dance. A hand on her stomach. And suddenly the world assumed he was going to be a father again. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, and replayed the video. Then he narrowed his eyes and replayed it again, this time slower. Something about the movement, subtle, graceful, almost too perfect, didn't sit right with him. It didn't feel accidental. But it also didn't feel like something Marina would deliberately orchestrate. He called her phone. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. He sent a text, then followed it with another. Minutes later, he stared at the screen as the messages remained unread. Devon stood up and walked to the hotel balcony. Below him, the city buzzed as it always did, honking cars, street vendors, children in uniforms. But his world had shifted overnight. He started pacing. He had spent months trying to respect her space. They weren't separated, not formally. They were in what Marina had called an emotional recalibration. He didn't argue with the term, although he hated it. He had hoped the distance would allow them both clarity. But now clarity had been hijacked by a 10-second video that neither of them had consented to share. As Devon tried to decide whether to board a flight home, another ripple was forming in Los Angeles. Jared Linney, the actor-turned-wellness entrepreneur, was in his home studio recording a podcast episode when his assistant barged in with a pale face and a phone. Jared paused the recording and reached out for the device. He watched the clip with a furrowed brow, then looked up sharply. He remembered the gallery event 2 weeks ago. Marina had stood close to him that night. They had posed together. She had laughed at his jokes. And afterward, they had shared a car alone. Nothing had happened, not that night. But the internet, from carefully crafted publicity stunts to accidental leaks. Commentators speculated about a secret surrogate, a reconciliation with Devon, or even a quiet romance with Jared Linney reignited under the radar. But Marina remained silent. Then, without warning, she posted a new video. It was short, no music, no movement, just a soft visual montage of her walking through her rose garden at dawn. She wore a cream-colored dress and held a cup of tea in her hand. At one moment, the camera lingered on her, placing that same hand gently over her abdomen, not in a cradling gesture, more like shielding or maybe deflecting. The caption read, "Some things bloom quietly." The internet exploded all over again. Julian Maddox watched the clip from his apartment in Manhattan. He paused at midway and leaned back in his chair. Then he replayed it again. He knew Marina's language. Every word, every gesture, every metaphor. She was controlling the story without giving it away. A calculated whisper instead of a shout. He muttered under his breath that it was brilliant, frustratingly so. He called a contact still working inside Marina's media circle and asked whether a statement was coming. The contact sighed. then said Marina was doing what she always did, letting the noise wear itself out, but Devon Halsten had grown tired of the guessing. He didn't wait for a press release or an official announcement. He booked the next available flight back to California. He arrived at her Montecito estate just after sunset. The house was still, as if holding its breath. Marina opened the door herself, barefoot and calm, her face unreadable. She stepped aside without a word, allowing him in. Devon walked through the familiar hallway, every painting and photograph in place. The scent of sandalwood lingered in the air, reminding him of better days. He turned to face her in the living room and asked if they could talk. She nodded and sat down, tucking her feet beneath her. He didn't dance around it. He asked directly if she was pregnant. She looked at him, her gaze steady but soft, and then she shook her head. She told him she wasn't. Then she paused, looked away for a moment, and added that she had thought about it, still did, in fact. That there were moments, in the quiet, when she imagined a third child, a little one to start over with. A different kind of rhythm. Devon felt the weight of her words, the way they pressed against the quiet in the room. He sat down across from her and didn't speak for a long time. Then he asked her if she wanted him to leave. She shook her head again. She told him she didn't know what she wanted right now, only that she needed the storm to pass before she could think clearly. Meanwhile, across town, Jared was dealing with a storm of his own. His manager had warned him that the public wasn't buying his carefully crafted denial. Fan forums had begun cross-referencing their old interviews, pulling moments when Marina had laughed a little too loudly at his jokes or when their hands had brushed during red carpet appearances. Jared sat in his backyard reading through the threads, his jaw tightening with each absurd theory. Then he threw his phone onto the table and walked away. He didn't blame Marina, but he also knew this wasn't sustainable. He decided to issue one final statement, short, direct, and firm. It made no mention of Marina's personal life. It simply affirmed that they were friends and colleagues, nothing more, and that he would no longer engage in speculation. Back in the hills, Alexei Monroe reviewed footage from Marina's last sit-down interview. There was a moment where she talked about reinvention, about wanting to live a life that wasn't constantly explained or defended. He paused the video and stared at the frame, frozen on her face, serene, yet guarded. Later that night, Marina walked Devon to the guest room. She told him he could stay for a few days if he wanted, but she also said she wasn't ready to talk about them. He nodded and placed his suitcase near the bed without unpacking. Before closing the door, she turned back and told him that the world always seemed to believe it had the right to define her as a mother, a wife, a scandal, a saint. And maybe part of her had let them. Devon looked at her and said nothing. He simply placed a hand over hers for a moment before letting her go. As the door shut softly, Marina leaned against the wall and exhaled. She wasn't pregnant, but something was changing. And this time, she wasn't sure she wanted to explain it to anyone. A full week had passed. Devon nodded, then told her that even without the cameras, she would have always lit up any room she walked into. It wasn't fame that made her magnetic. It was something deeper. She didn't reply, but her eyes softened. Elsewhere in Los Angeles, Jared Linney was wrapping up a yoga retreat in Topanga Canyon. He had stayed off social media since his final statement and refused all interview requests. His manager had pushed for damage control, but Jared insisted on stillness. He told himself that if people truly believed a 10-second clip defined his relationship with Marina, then no clarification would satisfy them anyway. He thought about texting her once, just a simple message to check in. But he deleted the draft before pressing send. Back in Montecito, Marina received a call from Alexei Monroe. He didn't ask about the baby rumors. Instead, he asked if she was still planning to record the final narration for episode 4 of their documentary. She told him she would prefer to come to the studio in person rather than send a voiceover. He agreed without hesitation. When she arrived 2 days later, Alexei greeted her quietly. The room was set, the mic adjusted, the script ready. She took her place and began reading the lines, her voice calm and measured. At one point, the script described a woman choosing not to explain herself to the world, and instead finding peace and silence. Marina paused mid-sentence, lowered the page, and looked toward the sound engineer's booth. Alexei raised his eyes, then asked if she wanted a break. She shook her head, picked the script back up, and finished the narration in one clean, deliberate take. Later that evening, as she drove home through the dusky hills, Marina felt a strange kind of peace. Not resolution, not yet, but quiet. That weekend, she attended a charity gala for children's education. It was her first public appearance since the video. She wore a champagne-colored satin gown cinched tightly at the waist, her hair swept up, her posture tall and unbothered. Cameras flashed as she stepped onto the carpet. Devon watched the event from home. The children were asleep upstairs. He paused the TV screen for a moment and studied her expression. She looked radiant, yes, but also unyielding, unreachable. Like a lighthouse standing above the storm. The next morning, headlines changed. Marina Halsten, not pregnant, just powerful. The Duchess reclaims her image in stunning gala appearance. Baby rumors fade, but her influence doesn't. But Marina didn't read them. She took her children to the beach instead. She packed a small bag, wore oversized sunglasses, and let the sea wind tangle her hair. The kids laughed as they chased waves. She sat on the sand, toes buried deep, and let the sun warm her face. Devon joined them halfway through the day. He brought sandwiches and juice boxes. The kids tackled him, squealing with joy. Marina watched them all from her spot, smiling faintly. As Devon sat beside her, she leaned slightly into his shoulder. He didn't speak, didn't move, just sat still,